So that laying down option, there's another one you can tinker with. Hopefully you have already in this video. Now you've also got your classic bear sit. So that's the one where people will have their hips up really wide and then they'll take one leg down and they'll bring it into a stretch this way. They might even have their hands on top. So again, it's another option. You can play with it. For some people, again, if your hips are really tight, you might find that when you first start experimenting with bear sit, that you have to actually prop yourself up on some yoga blocks and even lean back a little bit. Sometimes the yoga blocks is enough and then people can get into it pretty comfortably. Sometimes it's still a matter of, okay, I gotta lean back. I might even need more blocks. I might need a wall. I might need a couch behind me. And then I might have to work from here. That's fine as well. You can modify this position to make it work or just choose a different position. But with that, you're starting in abduction, so your knees are quite far apart. And you're trying to spin your thigh inwards such that your knee drops down, similar to the other one that I just showed you. And again, not let that pelvis come up with it. So if you think about the weight that you feel, like right now, if I had, let's say, a weigh scale underneath my right side yoga block and a weigh scale underneath my left side yoga block, my goal is to make sure that those numbers are equal and stay equal as I drop that knee down. Whereas for a lot of people, what you're gonna see is they shift over to that side. Easy, I can get my knee down, no problem. However, now you've actually dragged the socket along with it. So rather than getting the movement at the hip joint, you're getting it from somewhere else. And so if you're doing this for your hip, make sure it's coming from your hip when you do it. So imagine those little weigh scales underneath each sides of your sit bone, or in this case for me, each yoga block. As my knee drops down, I am not letting that weight come off of this side. And then I'm gonna hit a stretch way sooner. It's gonna be way less impressive because I can't get my knee as low because I'm not cheating and borrowing from other places. And then I can take my other hands or take my hands and apply a little bit of pressure down to get into a stretch. Once again, making sure when I do so that I don't start to shift over to the other side and that I'm staying heavy in that hip. I might even, to make it a little bit more aggressive, or even to reduce the need to press down with my hands to get a passive stretch, I might even just leave my knee where it is and go, okay, to get into this passive stretch, I'm actually just gonna shift my weight over to the right side, turn my pelvis a little bit to the right side, and I can get into my passive stretch that way. And now I don't need my hands to press down because I've moved the top half of the joint to get into the stretch, rather than using my hands to move the bottom half. There's no right or wrong. Play with both, see which one works best for you, or do a combination of both. I can get a little bit heavier into that hip, kind of turn slightly towards that side or bias that side a little bit, and apply a little bit of pressure with my hands. It's fine. So tinker with all of those variables. If you were going to apply pails and rails in this position, you're then trying to rotate out of the stretch, which means your foot is going to be applying force down into the ground. Your knee is going to want to pop up, but you won't let it. So now we do need our hand there to make sure it doesn't move at all. Just careful that you're not just thinking, press up into my hand. You really want to make sure you're hitting the tissue that we're targeting here, which means we really need to emphasize the rotation. So it's driving down through that foot as you think about spinning your thigh, which as a consequence will put some force or apply some force up into your hands. But if you just think press up, you're going to get a little bit more linear tissue rather than rotational tissue. So just, again, my tip in this position would be to really emphasize the rotation, which means force being applied down through the foot as you think about spinning your thigh inwards and keeping that knee in place with your hands. When you do your rails contraction, again, actually like the other position we talked about, you could do it a few different ways. You can get into your rails contraction by going, okay, I'm gonna pull myself over to that right side or shift more weight into my right hip without letting my knee move. That's one way to do your rails. Another way to do your rails, keep your pelvis the same. Don't let your pressure on that right side change. I'm gonna spin my thigh inwards and try and pull my knee deeper to the ground. Option number 2. Option number 3, do a combination of both. Think spin your thigh inwards to try and get that knee lower to the ground and get that right foot lighter on the ground as you get heavier into that hip. Again, that's an option for you as well. Of course, if you have a little bit more access to that position, you could do all of those things without your yoga blocks and just do your bear sit seated on the ground. that's fine too.